Old man adopts 6 unwanted girls. 4 years later, he realizes the reason why. The adoption of 6 young girls was not his intention when he walked into the orphanage that fateful day. The elderly widower was actually there to do some volunteering work as he had recently retired but did not feel like he had done enough to give back, and he also felt too young to just spend his days sitting in front of the TV. But today he would get the chance to really do something with the rest of his life. George was tasked to do some small maintenance jobs for the orphanage, and he was very happy to oblige. He would have rather spent some time with the children, but this also gave him the opportunity to connect with some of them. And sure enough, a couple of young girls seemed really interested in what he was doing. George was replacing a couple of planks and changing some light bulbs, and a group of 6 young girls came to stand beside him. George enjoyed having them around and tried to entertain them at the same time he was doing tasks. And this was the start of something very special. George started coming to the orphanage nearly every day as they had enough work that needed to be done. And he started to feel like his connection with these 6 little girls was becoming stronger and stronger. They followed him around all day, and after a week they were even waiting at the door for George to arrive some days. And the workers at the orphanage noticed this as well. On top of that, the girls started asking them when George was coming again and even called him Dad on occasion. And during this period, George could not help but get more and more curious about the story of these girls. How could 6 girls of such a young age not be adopted yet? At least one of them had to have a chance. After a bit of hesitation, the director of the orphanage decided to share the story with George. He explained that they had all gotten the girls in their care at exactly the same time by somebody. There were 2 sets of sisters and 2 separate children, but no clear story about how they were all connected. But because they all came in around the same time into a very full orphanage, they mostly started hanging out together. George was listening to the director's story intensely, but he could tell that she was holding some information back. He was very good at reading people, and it was clear to him that the director was lying about something. But George did not feel like it was his place to ask about this, at least not yet. He did start to feel like his next course of action was very clear. These girls needed somebody badly. Otherwise, they would stay at this overfull orphanage for years to come. But it was obvious that he was their only hope. And judging by their connection, George felt like this was the best option for everybody. The director looked a bit hesitant when George carefully tried to bring this up to her. She admitted that they had thought about it, but letting 6 very young girls be adopted by a windowed pensioner from a different ethnic background was something they would normally never do. But she had to admit that there were some special circumstances. George started to argue his case even more. The girl knew and liked him. He had plenty of life left in the tank. He had the means to take care of the girls, and he had all the time in the world. The director took all the arguments and then asked for a moment to discuss it with some colleagues. All George could do now was wait in anticipation for the decision. And the director came to find him later. She came bringing good news. George could adopt the girls. Sitting at the old wooden desk in the orphanage's quiet office, George carefully read through each page of the adoption paperwork. As he signed his name on each document, he felt a profound sense of purpose and responsibility wash over him. These signatures were not just legal formalities, they were promises. Promises of a better life, of love, and of a forever family for the girls. George spent the next few days transforming his house into a home fit for his new family. He painted walls, assembled beds, and arranged a play area, each brush stroke and tightened bolt filled with anticipation and hope. The day the girls arrived at George's house was one filled with nervous energy. As they stepped through the front door, each girl took in her new surroundings with a mix of curiosity and excitement. Their eyes roamed over every corner, taking in the colorful walls and the cozy furnishings. George watched, his heart swelling with pride as they explored what was now their home. In the following days, the girls began to settle into their new life. They explored every nook and cranny of the house, their giggles and footsteps a constant soundtrack in the background. George observed them with a mix of excitement and nervousness, wondering about the future. But in their smiles and laughter, he found reassurance that they were starting to feel at home. The financial implications of raising 6 children soon hit George hard. Groceries, clothing, school supplies, medical expenses, the costs were relentless. He found himself poring over his budget late into the night, trying to find ways to stretch his pension further. It was a balancing act of managing resources, sometimes requiring difficult decisions and creative problem solving. Each girl had her own way of seeing and interacting with the world, and managing these different personalities was a constant test of patience for George. There were moments of friction and tears, but also laughter and love. Learning to understand and cater to each girl's unique temperament and needs became a daily endeavor for George, often challenging but always rewarding. In the midst of daily life, George began to sense something unusual about the girls. It was a subtle, inexplicable feeling that something was not quite right. He couldn't quite put his finger on what it was, but it lingered in the back of his mind. This sensation was elusive, more like a whisper than a shout, making it hard for George to understand or explain it. Driven by this intuition, George began to observe the girls more closely. He watched their interactions, their expressions, and their reactions to different situations, looking for any clues that might explain his uneasy feeling. It was a delicate balance of being observant without being intrusive, as he did not want to alarm the girls or make them feel scrutinized. One quiet evening, as George was sifting through his emails, one particular message caught his attention, sending a jolt through him. The subject line hinted at undisclosed information about the girls. With a growing sense of apprehension, he opened the email. The words he read were shocking, suggesting a hidden truth about the girl's past that he had never known or suspected. The contents of the email flooded George's mind with questions and doubts. Determined to uncover the truth and find clarity in the midst of confusion, George resolved to confront the orphanage director. He felt a strong need to understand the full story, to gather all the pieces of this puzzle for the sake of the girls and himself. With a heavy heart, George gathered the girls and set out for the orphanage. As they drove, he rehearsed the questions he needed answers to, his determination growing with every mile. The girls, sensing his seriousness, were unusually quiet. George knew that this journey might change everything, but he was resolute in his quest for the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. George found the director and, without hesitation, demanded the full story behind the email. His voice was firm, reflecting the gravity of his need for the truth. The director seemed taken aback by his directness, but George's resolve was unyielding. He needed to understand the complete history of the girls' arrival at the orphanage, and he would not leave until he had answers. The director went on to reveal the involvement of a young male orphan in the scandal, a fact that left George reeling. The complexity and improbability of the situation were overwhelming, challenging his understanding of the orphanage's operations and the ethical boundaries he had assumed were in place. This revelation cast a new light on everything he thought he knew about the orphanage and the girls' history. Finally, the director admitted that the orphanage had orchestrated a cover-up, claiming the girls were abandoned to protect its reputation and avoid scandal. George listened in disbelief as she explained how the truth was concealed and the extent to which they had gone to maintain this facade. This confession left George feeling a mixture of anger, betrayal, and deep concern for the well-being of his daughters. Despite the turbulent revelations, George's commitment to the girls never wavered. He reassured them of his unwavering love and commitment, holding them close and affirming that they would always be his daughters, no matter what. In these moments, the strength of their familial love shone through, a beacon of hope and stability amidst the chaos of their unraveling story. The girls, each in their own way, struggled to comprehend the news of their origins. Their young minds grappled with feelings of confusion and hurt, trying to make sense of a past they couldn't remember but that suddenly defined them in ways they didn't understand. George watched them closely, his heart aching at their confusion, and did his best to provide comfort and reassurance in this tumultuous time. As they navigated this new reality, the dynamics between George and the girls began to evolve. There were moments of uncertainty and questions that were hard to answer. Yet, through this challenging period, a deeper understanding and respect developed between them. They learned to communicate more openly and support each other in new ways, adapting to their changing family landscape with resilience and love. Together, George and the girls began to accept their unique family story. They understood that their bond was not defined by the past, but by the love and experiences they shared.